Welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery programming series for our current show, Quilt National 2021, the Best of Contemporary Quilts. This exhibition is produced and circulated by the Dairy Barn Art Center in Athens, Ohio. Today, we're thrilled to present artist Danette Pratt, but first, just a few housekeeping items to go over. Everyone tuning in is in listen-only mode, so feel free to use that chat to ask questions. We'll be sure to get to them in the Q&A section of this talk. Next, live captioning is available. So if you want to access those, go ahead and click on the closed caption icon and select Show Subtitle. Please keep in mind that because we're presenting from separate locations, there may be some variation in bandwidth. So if one of us freezes up or sound fluctuates, thanks in advance for bearing with us. Lastly, go ahead and get yourself comfortable, pop into the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Okay, Danette, now to you.
Hi, my name is Danette. Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Amy, for inviting me to do this talk. And I wanted to also say thank you to the Ohio Arts Council, for supporting artists here in Ohio. I live in southeastern Ohio, close to the Ohio River. And this is a pretty typical scene of southeastern Ohio. I've always lived rural. My early childhood was on a farm. And this is an early foggy spring morning. This is a picture of a very frosty morning in my front yard. And this is a picture of my mailboxes that were leaving my driveway on a very hot, humid, early summer morning. For 30 years, or almost 30 years, I worked at Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine. I was the support, graphic artist support and biological illustrator support for the medical school and for the life science research scientists at OU. This included physicians, anatomists, all the research faculty that taught at the medical school. I was collected and put their articles, their figures together for publication, and I had very wonderful clients to work with. That was Lisa Crockett. She did Antarctic fish studies, as well as Dr. Eastman, who I did extensive illustrations for. This is one of his journal figures that I put together for him. I also was very happy to illustrate 4 new species of fish, Antarctic fish, for Dr. Eastman. That was a cumulative work for several years, drawing lots of fish brains. And I thought I'd include a couple photographs of his trips to Antarctica and another example of fish brain illustration that I did. This was the first new species of Antarctic fish that I did for him. This was the second one. This shows how the specimens come in when he comes back from Antarctica, what I have to work with. I work very closely with the researchers to draw this, making sure that all the fin counts were measured correctly and portrayed to this particular fish. This is the 4th fish that he collected, new species. And usually I did pen and ink on drafting film. This one we got to do in color. It was color pencil on film. I also did many illustrations of salamanders and frogs for Dr. Michael Lanou. I first met him when he was a postdoc here at OU and became good friends with him and his wife. I've illustrated about 3 books for him, did multiple, not only illustrative, but data and population maps for his book publications. I also did larger mammals. This was for Dr. Williams and her work with a jaw portion of a llama. These were a series of, and more illustrations of a dissected moose head. These were just an example. It was with Dr. Lawrence Whitmer, and he did work with nasal cavities in the moose. excuse me, I have allergy problems today. I also, on the side, have always sketched and, you know, did personal drawings for myself. And one of them, this was my little Yorkie who died a few days after this. You know, just quick sketches. This was a little fledgling that I gathered on my walk across campus one day where the yard crew had, well, first the poor little bird probably fell out of the nest and then they ran over it. And so I decided to take it home and at least give credit for this little guy. This is actually a pretty large drawing. It was like 20 by 30. And it was Conte crayon with charcoal and pastel. And then the tire marks, I cut a stencil and did carbon dust to represent a tire mark. This caterpillar was created, it's ink on film, drafting film, and then color pencil was added to the back of it to give the colored spots. It was part of an exhibit that was done at the Kennedy Museum of Art. They had in their collection a Calder print that was butterflies, and so they decided to do an exhibit called with butterflies, and they asked OU artists and community to submit artwork for it. This is me with another part of that entry. I also do 3D work, and I work exclusively with recycled socks. I also am a spinner and a weaver, so I do some felted works too. So these were representative cocoons that were felted and embroidered, and then there's larval forms back here that were also embroidered. Oops. I also did a close-up face of a Sphinx moth and drew it, then redrew it in Illustrator in a very stylized form and created a poster for Mothman Festival 2012, which is actually held in Point Pleasant. So actually, I think this exhibit was in 2012, but the Mothman Festival is held in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the second week of September. This is representative of the dolls that I work with, or I design. They're sock monkeys, but I make them into zombie sock monkeys and classic monsters. Other creatures and things that I draw, I love Halloween, and I call them my creepy little ink drawings that I do on the side. And I sort of have a comic book interest. And as a 50s and 60s kid, I always grew up with Godzilla, Star Trek, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. So I'm definitely a sci-fi person, fantasy person. This was a painting I did, I think in 2014. It was just for me. It was Controller X from Planet Zero, that Godzilla versus Monster Zero. I do so that I don't do very many flat paintings. Most of them are textural with found objects and fabric and lots of stitching. This is a large, that one was pretty small, it was like 10 by 10. This one is a much larger painting, was probably 42 by 42. And in 2009, there was a series of sci-fi movies that came out that had zombie sheep in them. I thought it was very amusing. So I used that as a focal point for some of my drawings and paintings. This was, I'd taken a picture of these two really gorgeous Doberman pincers in a friend's truck. And I multiplied them and cut out stencils. And this was spray acrylic on acid-free board that was mounted onto another board with ticking and tassels. You can kind of see the stencil. I think I had 5 different stencils that I cut out for layers of color. I also have done costume work. This was a representation of a Tuscan Raider female costume. More caterpillars in sock material. This is the side view of that little caterpillar that I showed you previously. This is another insect form. This one was a character from Mike Mignolda's Young Hellboy Dark Horse series comics. It was called a maggot fly, which I found very amusing. I also do animated GIFs. I did a lot of them back in 2012 through maybe 2015. The Tate Museum in London had a call for artists to, they gave us 4 paintings to choose from, and we were supposed to animate them. And so I sent in one for them, and they had their photographer, their museum photographer went around and took pictures of all the artists that wasn't able to attend the opening. This is the picture that I chose back here. I think it was the girl in gray or the girl in the gray room. I can't remember the name of the picture now, but this was my entry, and this was the gift that I produced for that particular exhibit. But then most of my gifts are, you know, comic related and Godzilla. He's always a good subject for me. And then I'm going to take you back home and kind of talk about my dyeing process with leaves that are collected on my property. The Eastern Pansy Redbud, Witch Hazel, and Red Twig Dogwood are probably some of my main leaves that I work with. As a dyer, I know a lot of eco dyers try to keep the formation of the leaf and maybe even put them in a composition so that all the leaves are recognizable. But with my dyeing, I'm not so interested in that. I'm interested in the deepness of the color, how I let the leaves kind of speak for themselves. I bundle them in, most of the fabrics I use are 100% cotton. The printed ones are usually representational of old flour sacks. I love to use ticking and muslin, both bleached and unbleached. So I'm interested in the marks that are left, and especially with the wrapping with the bundles. I steam those bundles. Sometimes I let them cool and then I re-steam them again. I found that the cords that I use, both jute and cotton, retain some of the dye and will transfer it onto fabrics. So that really interested me. This is an example of one. This was witch hazel that was on ticking. Another gif of my fabrics drying out in my front yard. So I wanted to do a statement, just sort of kind of let you know what I work with. So recent work and process has both been surprising and has me looking closer to those occurrences that cause memory flashes, memory occurrences that can be triggered by temperature, change, taste, smell, a place, an unexpected movement out of this corner of your eye. It's those occurrences that prompted me to keep exploring links between the natural materials I work with and how they unexpectedly produce recollections that are personal to me and to others. I would also like to add that part of it is with my walks around my hayfield that I keep mowed as a regular walk for myself, you know, I sort of have walking meditations that are part of that statement too. This was the first solo exhibit that I did that had my fabrics in them. It's called Continued to Be. It was sort of a tribute to my mother and my father and their support as for me as an artist. They are both now passed. This one was especially important to me for my mother. She was the one that taught me most of my textile and fiber techniques and interests. And and then they expanded from there, but I lost her very early and at a time that she just planned to move down and we'd become really good friends. And we were looking forward to spending time to be doing textile and sewing and those kind of things together. And then she was snatched away. And so this was my tribute to my mom. This one sort of dealt with my father's death. I did these monoprints of pigs that were being used for research, and the researcher was letting me have a few minutes before they started working on them to go in and ink the bodies and did a pressing, a pressed monoprint off of the body. And it was just I had an experience that really reminded me of being with my father when he died. So this was kind of a tribute to my dad. these were the single panels that you just saw. And then there was a nice close-up. I got a lot of nice detail from those prints. This one was just sort of a conclusion of dealing with, you know, having lost both parents. This was this fabric was mostly alum mordant, and there was a big difference. I used two different fabrics. One's iron mordant and one is alum, and they get different colors with the tree leaves that I use. This is some detail work of that particular piece. And then back to the mark making on with the bundles of steamed fabrics. This one was called reflecting or reflection because it looked like I was on a still lake with a reflection of trees around the edge. And I'm going to jump to Iowa because that's where I worked with Dr. Michael Lanou. He was a researcher that worked nationally with other researchers with disappearing amphibians in the country. I was there in late 1990s. I had an absolutely wonderful time and I loved the area. And then I was called back in 2015 by Mike to come and give a talk on my biological illustrations. And I was actually kind of really shocked at the environmental changes from like 1999 to 2015. It was just amazing. And so this was a piece, it was called Sojourn There and Back Again. I'm going to give you a close-up of these photo panels, but these objects here were, there were silos that were going to disrepair, and the drive out there and through Iowa shows how it's changed to be definitely corporate agriculture now, and not so much large family farm productions. So on my way out, I saw this little yellow submarine that had been, it was actually a chemical station for tractors to pull up and either, you know, herbicide or fertilizer one to use in the fields. And so I was just thinking of the world situation, our planet situation, that, you know, we're kind of backing ourselves up into a tank, a yellow submarine, and, you know, our survival is survival of the planet, and we're just not paying attention to it very much. The lower panels are a 360 view of my workspace at the labs there at Lakeside Lab on Lake Okoboji. I'm sorry, I didn't say where I was going. It was the northwestern corner of Iowa. The Lakeside Lab has been there since the early 1800s as an environmental studies park or reserved space. I also took with me, I do alternative photography. And so I had my Holga camera with me. This was one evening with Sue and I was out on a back roads with her dogs, and we were watching a big storm come in. And the reason why I like Holgas is that you can do these great double exposures. This one is actually a triple exposure photo. I also did, I was playing around with my cell phone too. In the lab that I stayed in, they had these great metal containers that are called vestibules that, or from, I think they're originals from when the cabins were built. They are used by botany students when they're out in the field to collect plants and then bring them back. Also very interested in alternative ways to develop pictures, because I'm very sensitive to photo chemicals. I can't use them anymore. So this was, I did an emulsion of meadowgrass and used that as my emulsion that I painted onto watercolor paper. I had a negative that was of a American multi-horn sheep, American Jacobs. And it was a high contrast photo that I printed on a laser printer. Then I waxed and made it transparent. I clamped those, the emulsion watercolor paper, the negative, between two pieces of glass, and I exposed it to sun for 3 days. And this was the image that I got. The leftover chlorophyll emulsion I painted simple little paintings on them and called them cud drawings. And I also waxed those papers so they're kind of a transparent look. I also use a very small camera. I'll try and show at the end of this. It's they call them sub miniatures or spy cameras. They were very popular in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I have to roll 17.5 millimeter film, which is half of a 35 millimeter roll, onto these little tiny spools and fit them into this camera. I only get 10 exposures per roll of film. And I also develop it in a coffee developer at home. The only chemical I do use is I use a fixer, but I use that very cautiously and try not to be around it very much. I also like to say that, so this is sensitive fern that was collected down in my, the plant I used here was sensitive fern, which was a meadow fern. And then this was red twig dyed dogwood. And these were kind of a shibori style clamped. It wasn't steamed, but they were clamping and wrapping process. I also did some work with ceramics. I have a big interest in medieval textiles, and from like in the 1990s, I was doing a lot of work with medieval fabrics, reconstruction, weaving and trying to reconstruct medieval fabrics. I did a lot of embroidery, did a lot of weaving. I grew flax. That's what, and so my medieval studies just kept taking me further and further back until I got all the way back to the Stone Age and twining techniques, and also was very interested in tablet weaving, which is again medieval technique. But I made this little Stone Age figure with an apron, and I thought I'd show you some examples of aprons and string skirts that I was interested in at the time. So here's an example of embroidery that I really loved. I was part of a Viking reenacting group that we built this little boat right here. Was our boat, was called Blackbird here in the middle. So it's us building the boat, and then we were cutting down the trees, building the boat, sailing it on the lake. This is to the dimensions of the original Bayou Tapestry, and I use the Bayou Tapestry stitch and a running stitch and a split stitch. So this is a medieval type loom. Actually, it was a Viking age around 850 AD. I built about 4 of these, but this is the one, this is my first one, and I still have it, and I still weave on it. I built, or I made the tools. These are pin beaters and sword beaters that you use with this particular loom. And then there's a flax breakdown here that I used for when I grew my flax and processed it. This is a blanket that I wove on the loom. This is me here weaving on my loom with my little sword up. And this is the Icelandic sheep that live across the road from me. And this says Barbara wove this blanket on her work weighted loom. It's about the size, it's about the length of a twin bed. What's real notable here is on work weighted fabrics, they're usually at the top. This was the top of the weaving. And as you weave, the warps keep getting closer and closer because the loom weights twist and keep coming in closer. So this was real typical of a warp weighted loom fabric. I had interest also in my reading with research. I was also very interested in heritage livestock breeds, and that covers sheep, goats, horses, pigs. I was sort of reading any article I could, but got very interested with realizing that there are horse breeds that are going extinct or on the endangered list. And so I was experimenting with latex, and I had this collection of briar horses that, and here's a picture of them in the process of being coated and painted to represent heritage breeds that were that are on the endangered list. This was one set that I did of pigs that were, I think they're extinct. This was done in 2015. It was a juried show and was shown at the First Street Gallery in New York. These went through many changes or many interpretations of display. Same with the horses. This one was a 72-inch display. It was a solo show at the Majestic Galleries in Nelsonville, Ohio. A little bit of a close-up there. Also in this particular show, I was experimenting on trying to, do a low relief example of animals using cantha stitch, embroidery stitches. And this was a cast of a pig's foot. And then we're going to move into more kind of work with my thoughts on being a child and my support and how I got to be interested in just animals and drawing animals and being outdoors and being kind of sort of a self-taught naturalist, and how I got to my career. This is representing my childhood bedroom at the farmhouse. It was pretty bare with a bare light bulb. I built this little wooden bed to represent a child bed, and I recreated this cotton mattress, the old cotton mattresses that were on springs, distressed it, and gathered flooring to make it look like hardwood floor. And again, a representation of endangered livestock in the background. This was a members show at the Majestic Gallery in 2014. I got to work with Holly Cole while she was here at OU. She was teaching in the props class, and I learned so many techniques from her. Part of it was working with this plastic mesh that they use for actors so that they can see through so they can have all kinds of heads and shapes, but it's still very easy to look through this mesh. It's a plastic mesh that you either heat with hot water or a heat gun, and you can mold over a form. It's really awesome stuff. And so this was a couple places they were that was at the Majestic Galleries again, I think. And this can show you how it's very visible mesh to look through. Again, talking about my meadow walk. So this is kind of the shape of my property, and lots of walking, and sometimes I sit and stitch, or so these are just little samples and sort of stitch meditations, I guess, about my process and what I'm doing with these fabrics. This was an alumni show at OU in 2018. And then, so we're on to, this was the Quilt National entry that I did in 2017. It went on tour after it was at the Dairy Barn. And after it came back home, the Dairy Barn approached me, wanted to know, I guess they work with the International Quilt Museum, always asking for donations. And I said, sure, I would love to donate this piece. So it now is at the International Quilt Museum. But I made another piece. I made this one longer. I'm a surface design member, and this was a call for entry at one of their international meetings in Sebastopol, California in 2017. And then when it came home, it was in a short exhibit here in Athens. I added an installation piece with it to represent my meadow. I really liked it with the installation, but that was the only time I put it up. Here's a little detail shot of that same piece. And it was the same cantha embroidery stitching that was on the 2017 quilt too. And another detail shot. This was a piece that was in Ohio +5 show that the Dairy Barn has. I think it's every other year. It was called Animal Mindfulness, and I led a meditation for about, I don't know, I think it was around 20 people. I handed out these squares of paper and a pen, and when I led them through the meditation, and then I gave them, I think, about 3 or 4 minutes to sit, and I wanted them to put marks on the paper that were representational of every time they thought of an animal that was important in their life, whether it was a pet or just an animal that they liked, I wanted them to put down a mark. And the marks were just a, you know, a dash, a line, a circle, or a dot. And then they were supposed to take the paper and pin it up on this this piece of fabric that I had hanging in the space. And my contribution to it was these 2 squares that they were my test pieces when I did my pig prints. And so I thought that was very appropriate for them to be up there. So I asked them to just walk up and pin their pieces wherever they wanted to on this panel. And then I transferred all their marks onto the fabric and I embroidered them and a more cantha embroidery. That's the piece actually that's hanging behind me. This was a piece I had started working on a class with the Dairy Barn, but the class became really complicated, and it was too complicated for just a regular community class to offer. It was more of a, it would have taken more time to have created. And so I wound up finishing the piece. It was called Tied to My Grandmother's Apron Strings. While I was designing the class, I'd asked a couple other friends, artists, to do, you know, take the example and make something, and they did. So we had 3 pieces that we could still exhibit, and the Dairy Barn was really nice. It was called the Memory Shirt Project, and the Dairy Barn was really nice. They put it in an upstairs hallway during the 2019 Quilt National. This was representing my childhood on the farm again. Of my grandmother's, I call her, she was my Anatomy 101 instructor. I helped her take care of the garden and the chickens. And so this is her up here. And this was my mother tending chickens too. So it just has, you know, the life of a chicken, you know, to the end. So I have feathers represented. There was piles of feet and heads when we were butchering. The hens came to the end. We had a lot of chickens. It was my grandmother's production there at the farm. So we had laying hens that would come to the end of their laying time, and they would all be butchered and put in the freezer. So these are burn barrels that we, you know, hung them over the flames to burn off all the pin feathers. And then after they were all butchered and cleaned up from outside, they'd take them inside, and I'd wind up being on the counter while she was cutting everything up and putting it in the freezer. And that's where my anatomy lessons happened. So in 2019, during the Quilt National, there was a group of Chilean quilters that also had a show in the small gallery at the end of the main gallery. And they came up, it was during the closing of the Quilt National 2019, and I was able to meet with them. Actually, the Dairy Barn asked me to give a workshop for them while they were here visiting, which I did, and got to know them. They were a really lively group of people and liked them very much. And also, they met with a group that I'm associated with at the Dairy Barn called Textile Artists of Southeastern Ohio. And we all decided that we liked each other so much and that we'd do a collaboration. They loved the Athens area. And we asked them about their region in San Diego. So we decided to do a collaboration exhibit using our textile arts and to describe the region around San Diego and Athens. I again played on childhood memories of berry picking, where I had this huge, when I was probably about 3 or 4, and I suddenly had this huge white curly head in front of me, and I thought it was a polar bear. And so I went running to my dad and said, there was a polar bear, and he said, no, it's our big bull Henry. So, but it was still representational of plants that were here. And we have lots of blackberries and raspberries and greenbriers. And they're all along the edge of my field. And I see these, I wanted to have the little critters that are, I see regularly in my field, which is a tortoise, or, you know, little box turtle, and raccoons, possums and snakes. And here's some more mark making with my fabric dyeing. I do lots of photo transfers. And so these are photo transferred and then applied onto the surface. Oh, I should say that these were panels that were all pieced together and hand stitched. See more of the stitching in detail, and I really liked these mark makings over here. I have lots of wild turkeys. I love my wild turkeys. This was the back of the piece that we also have skunks. I put the skunk on the back of the thing, on the back of it. The bull that was the white bull in the front, the Charlet, was actually reverse applique, and I took that piece and I put it back on. So this is the flip side. I redid the photo transfer onto the back and reapplied the applique piece that I cut out and put it on this piece, so I wouldn't lose my mark making. I didn't want to lose the mark making. And I also, this was the first. I was working on the next exhibit too, but I was playing around with needle punch and making. This was reverse needle punch. You'll see more of it. And there's the skunk again. So my latest solo exhibit was called Atomic Fabrications, A Practical Guide. It was at the Dairy Barn last November. October through November. And again, it was reflection back to 50s and 60s, Cold War, you know, listening to adults talking about whether we should convert the root cellar into a, you know, bomb shelter, what, you know, what to do. And so I'd started collecting images. I've been collecting images, and I stumbled across government brochures on what to do after the bomb has fallen, and, you know, how to build a bomb shelter. And so this was actually the first piece that I did, and it was entered into a surface design juried exhibit that was in Indianapolis in 2020. That was where their national meeting was held. And it is actually a frame grab from a YouTube that showed, you know, the 50s, 60s test sites in New Mexico where the blast hits the trees. And I recolorized it and worked it with needle punch. I was in this body of work, I was also trying to use needle craft that was very popular in the 50s and 60s, which was needle punch, rug hooking, embroidery, and wool applique. So this was the first piece. This was another piece I really liked. I researched government brochures and picked up on some line drawings. These were all representative line drawings that I reinterpreted. And this one was from a Canadian publications for farmers, what to do after the bomb and what to do with fallout. And this particular one was called Plow the Fallout Under, like that would help. But so again, it was a line drawing, and I chose my colors and recolorized it. This was, I think this might have been one of the covers of one of our government's brochure. This was, I called it Rad Day at the Beach. I drew these figures on muslin and then appliqued them onto weaver's cloth, drew flames with color pencil, and there's actually some gold foil underneath here. This piece is only 6 by 6. The other pieces I just showed you were like 10 by 10. So the flames were done with reverse needle punch. Another kind of a comic interpretation that I saw along the way, you know, kind of a desolate feeling of after the bomb had fallen. And this is from the Canadian publication where the cloud of fallout is hitting the farm, a pristine farm. This was actually sort of from my growing up in Mansfield. Mansfield has a downtown that used to have a central park that was a roundabout. And we did all of our shopping downtown when I was small. And all the buildings had these civil defense signs on them, and you never see civil defense signs anymore. But these were the places that if you were caught out and away from your home and the bomb fell, that you could go to. They were basements or sub-basements in large buildings like the banks and churches and newspapers that were surrounding the central park of the town. It's a close-up. These were jelly printed patches that I pieced together. And this was my wool applique. I didn't want to do the stealth bomber with wool, so I had my son 3D print me a little teeny tiny bomber so that it looked hard against the wool fabric. This is another one of those, you know, what farmers are supposed to do after the bomb is hit and you're dealing with fallout and what to do on their farm. And I don't know, it's just such a bizarre statement. You may have to bury animals that die. Again, this was applique and piecework, and this was all reverse needle punch. And we're going to go into my doll designs, Seriously Sick Socks. I mentioned them a couple times. They're recycled socks, and I make them into zombie sock monkeys or classic monsters. This is Franken Monkey. This is Wednesday from the Addams Family. This is my little Pocketzilla. He was, everybody likes him. I've actually done a couple classes here in Athens. We had a lot of fun trying to put this little guy together. I also do some that are called Pocket Zombies, and they're smaller versions of my big sock monkeys. I've given a couple classes with those that people have really liked. This trio here was called the After Midnight Grub Club, or Searching for Grub Club. It was, they were dolls that were published in Prim's magazine in 2018. And then I had another set. This trio was from Billy Goat's Gruff, but these are called the Gruffian Troll Patrol. So they're rough and tough billy goats that go after and beat up trolls with their wooden clubs. This was a Tooth Fairy. This character here was Walter from a series of books called Awfully Appetizing. He was a ghoul morticianist. And then this was the Skeksis from Dark Crystal. And then this was a Manly Mandrake from Harry Potter. And we are at the end of my presentation. I had a couple things I wanted to share with you. If you wanted to see more of my artwork, you can go to www.danettepratt.site. SeriouslySickSocks.wordpress.com will give you to a not updated Seriously Sick Socks website, but it will be updated soon. Right now, my whole collection, doll collection, is at the Dairy Barn Arts Center. They have a Scribble and Play, which exhibit is on now, which is a children's interactive exhibit. And it's now through Easter weekend, and you can look at their calendar of events. I know there's going to be a marionette show coming up that people are all excited about. I will be there on the 16th from 2 to 4 to share my sock doll creations. And if you have any interest in doll making, I would really appreciate you coming. I would love to meet you. And everybody gets to handle the dolls while I'm there in the gallery. I'll also be at Arts West Community Arts Center in November and December with an exhibit that is with two other artists, Erin Hogan and Emily Beveridge. It's going to be a medieval theme. They're going to be putting, Arts West is going to be putting on a play called A Lion in Winter. And you, again, could go to their Arts West calendar events for, I'm not sure when this is going to be opening, but Seriously Sick will be there probably in medieval bestiary form. My Seriously Sick Sock studio has just moved, and we're located behind Chosen Pathways, which is a pretty recent gift shop and artist consignment shop that has opened here in Athens, Ohio. I don't know the address because I don't get my mail here, but it's right off the main exit into Athens. If you Google Chosen Pathways, I'm sure you will find find me. I'm not here all week long. I'm only here pretty much on Mondays and Tuesdays. You can make arrangements. You can contact me somehow. You can go to my webpage. I have contact information there if you'd like to stop by and see me. This is the Flora, Fauna, and Landscape exhibit. It will be up. This is with the collaboration with the Chilean quilters. This is the address. It's kind of a weird address, and I don't know if you search for Flora. Yes.
We'll go ahead and put that in the comments.
Okay. Okay.
So folks will be able to click through. Yeah.
Okay. So it will be up here in Athens again on May 2nd through the 31st. It will be at the National Quilt Museum, Paducah, Kentucky, February 24th through May 2nd, 2023, and then it will finally get to Chile. Pat Caffrey is the person who has helped curate this exhibit with me. She is in the midst of doing all the gallery scheduling right now for in Chile. And I think that's it.
Wonderful. So let's chat a bit. Go ahead and then stop share, and then you and I will just chat and talk a bit about.
Okay.
So let's see here.
Did I stop? Are we good?
Good. Yep, you're totally good. I'm
Okay.
going to pin both of us. All right. So Danette, your artistic voice is so clear in your work. I'm curious. Tell me a little bit about what Quilt National has meant to you. You shared with us the piece that
sure.
Quilt National, but it's like a pretty big deal to be a part of it. Can you talk a little bit more about
Yes.
that?
Actually, I will. I didn't touch on it very much. The Quilt National was something that my mother and I always went to. I mean, we have gone to it since its initiation, and it was like those are one of the special times when my mother did come down to visit and stay with me. That was a big reason why we went. So we always were interested in techniques. I had started this work on my meadow walks and meditations and why I got to the career that I wound up in. I'd already been thinking about it, and that first piece, that piece was actually kind of a preliminary piece for other. I still have other works that I wanted to go with that particular. Well, I can't go with that one because that one's now in the Quilt Museum, but no. And the Dairy Barn itself, the Dairy Barn isn't just the Quilt National. Dairy Barn here in Athens is a very I've always, in fact, when the Dairy Barn first opened, I was making dolls then that were called treadle dolls, and I was sewing them on a treadle sewing machine. And the dolls that I made then were like little fairies and pans and mermaids. And I went to two, I think it was Salt Fork Park. They have a big craft show every year in the summer, and it was over in Ripley, West Virginia. So that's where I was selling my dolls at that time. So no, the Dairy Barn is more than just a Quilt National for us, and that's my link to it. I'm a member, been a member for many years, and work with them closely. They're good people.
Yeah, it's a really important institution within the area, but also for the fact that it has truly elevated textile and fiber art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I try to encourage that. They put an edition on that had a fiber art studio. That's one reason why I belong to the this group. The group isn't just for quilting. It's kind of a we do journal reports and artist talks, and we do critiques, and we go on like gallery visits and stuff. So it's and the Dairy Barn has always been really generous to us for meeting places, and so they're good people. I love working with Holly. Holly is the exhibits manager, And and I have to put a plug in. She did a great job on displaying my doll collection at the barn that's on view now. So I would encourage, if you have a chance to run down to Athens, it'll close on Easter weekend, which I think, well, Saturday when I'm there on the 16th is the day before Easter, I think on the 17th. So if you have any interest in doll making, please come and share. I mean, we can have an open discussion on doll making. These are soft skull. There's actually a couple other doll makers there, and then there's the marionette and puppet person that will be there. Passion Works is also in the. I think a lot of people are familiar with Passion Works, so they have their big doll, and so the exhibit is split between like a regular kids gallery space, and then the other end of the gallery is all hands-on, so you can, it's very interactive. And I think Holly has designed like a, what do you call it, like not a treasure hunt, but you know, you have to hunt for something. You know, you have a little treasure map or a little creature map that you have to follow and see if you can find all the hidden places that it's at. So it's a pretty fun kids exhibit.
That sounds great, a little scavenger hunt. So
yep, a scavenger hunt, that's what I'm trying to say.
I want to bring it back a little bit to the work that you make, and something that I was thinking about as I was viewing you bouncing back and forth in content is that you have these really serious, heavy pieces of content, and then you have fantasy and you know, sci-fi, and there is a true link between both of them. And I'm curious, how does that work for you? Do they balance each other so that you're able to you know, lighten your load, your emotional
I think I know what you're saying, yeah. And you know, I think it happened, my work, my career as a biological illustrator and graphic designer, you know, on campus breaks, everybody leaves, but that doesn't happen for researchers. It's like after they teach class and everybody leaves, it's the breaks that they're there and they have to get their publications together and put together. And so that's actually my really busy time. And they always appreciated me being there for them, but it was also very so it could be very stressful too, because it depended on how many things were in all at the same time. So it got to the point, and you know, being an artist, I always like to do my own stuff too. So I really had to work on serious technical biological drawings, and then have kind of an out when I went home to do my own stuff and to be a lot more lighthearted with it. So yes, I think that's what happened. You know, I was so serious with my work, and I feel so privileged as an artist to have, I mean, my whole life has been full of art. I mean, in my career and at my home, I mean, I'm always doing something. So it's been a good life. I've really enjoyed it, and I cannot. My work was like the best thing ever. I had just the best people to work with, and I really, and it's really good when you know that, you know, your talent is going to be shared by someone who really appreciates it. So and so a lot of my, you know, my own artwork, I think it just is done just for my happiness, my pleasure. And I don't even care about selling it. But like I said, the sock monkeys, they just sort of, they just, people asked, I made them, I can't keep them made fast enough, you know? So, and it makes me happy that people want them, you know, but I don't try to do it for income. I do it because I have fun doing my art, you know, and creating.
I think that that's a really delightful thing to make sure that we center on when we're sharing artist talks is the reality of life within working and how it can balance and unbalance and balance again. And so I really appreciate not only the juxtaposition of content and kind of how that butts up against, but is always true in your voice, your artistic voice, but also your willingness to quite literally, even when I was looking at, you were explaining some of your pieces being the stitches being the backside of
the front work, yeah.
yeah, but like it's just like it makes so much sense with your history of looking inside and seeing things beyond just the front, that would be a practice of yours to go beyond that and test in new material or see a process where one might see the back end, right? Like not thinking that that could be a piece of it. I just really appreciate that that is a constant voice within your work. However,
Oh,
you're
thank you. I really appreciate that.
yeah, it's wonderful. And I guess I will ask the very last thing I'll ask is who and or what is inspiring you currently?
Currently, well, currently I'm like really focused on trying to well, two things. One was getting my Seriously Sick Socks moved back into a new studio that is separate from my art studio. And although some of it's spilling over in here, so I'm working on a Quilt National piece. But last year I had a hip replacement, and last year was a long recovery year, and it made things not, well, I mean, I still did a lot of production, and luckily I'd done a lot of the work for the atomic fabrications. It was all completed. I just had little bits and pieces, and then Holly did such a great job of putting it up. And that actually, those pieces are all on my website, and pictures of the gallery too. But so this year I'm trying to do a catch up. Last year when I was recovering, I rediscovered sketchbook, my sketchbook. So I think I really focused on just working on my sketchbook. And so I have some pieces that I want to transfer and retell as fabric pieces. So that's what I'm probably going to be working on this year too. So that's, and again, they're and actually they're going to be, I'm actually kind of very excited about them because they're going to be like a Forgotten Goddess series is what I think is going to be in production this year, besides doing inventory for Seriously Sick Socks, which will be sold at the Chosen Pathways here where my studio is located.
Well, that sounds pretty perfect and is the exact right place for us to wrap this up. So I'm going to thank you again,
Yes.
Danette, for the kindness in sharing your work with us. Thank you all for joining us for this Artist Talk by Danette Pratt as part of our programming for the Quilt National 2021 Best of Contemporary Quilts. I'd like to give a special thank you to the Dairy Barn, who's putting on wonderful exhibitions, as you heard. Make sure you go and visit them, but also the Quilt National exhibition that this programming is a part of. I also want to thank the participating artists, as well as the Ohio Arts Council's board, the Ohio legislature, and the governor, who support the OAC in this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you.